Before I start with my presentation, I would just like to say a huge thank you to all the volunteers, all the sponsors, all the staff that made the tournament a possibility for everyone. I know it was super difficult under the circumstances, but you guys are amazing. You guys made it happen, so thank you so much, guys. Now to my presentation. Under the management perspective, my partners and I have identified 3 problems and corresponding solutions. We will start off with distracted driving, then move on to deadheading, and then conclude with company rebranding. Issue number 1 is distracted driving. 1 out of every 4 car accidents in the US is caused by texting and driving. Think about that for a moment. That's a huge number of crashes. It is bad enough that this is already happening, but what's worse is that Uber systematically promotes distracted driving. The success of ride-hailing depends on the use of mobile apps allowing riders to place requests and drivers to receive them. This actually distracts the drivers in 3 ways. First, ride requests can and do come in at any time, including while the vehicle is moving. They beep and flash similar to phone notification, distracting the driver. Then, the driver has 15 seconds to accept the request, forcing them to pick up the phone to look at the request and to decide whether or not to accept it all while driving. Keep in mind that taking one's eyes off the road for about 5 seconds is long enough to cover an entire football field while driving at approximately 55 miles per hour. Finally, the possibility to receive a request at any time forces the drivers to anticipate incoming requests instead of focusing their attention 100% on the road. According to the University of Utah, cell phone users are 5.36 times more likely to get into an accident than undistracted drivers. This not only places drivers in danger, but also their customers. This is a flaw in the design of the app, so it ultimately comes down to the management to solve the problem. Ride-hailing apps have turned to voice control before in an attempt to solve it. However, it can be just as distracting, if not more, since it takes up to 27 seconds to regain awareness of one's driving environment after using voice control. Instead, we propose this. Uber must lock the app once it detects that the vehicle is in motion, meaning that the driver can no longer receive any notifications of rider requests. This is a technology that's widely available. iPhones do not disturb while driving is a prime example. The tech can either utilize Bluetooth to know if the phone is connected to a vehicle, or the Wi-Fi Doppler effect using Wi-Fi signals. The way it works is that Wi-Fi signals are electromagnetic waves, and ones coming from, say, a Starbucks emanates from a router that is not moving. If you're in a moving car, your phone's Wi-Fi chip could detect the frequency change of radio waves coming from the router, hence concluding that you're driving. If we're able to block out the request, it would benefit both the company and the drivers in multiple ways. First, it would reduce distracted driving, potentially saving lives. 2, it would reduce possible lawsuits against Uber. And 3, it would reduce deadheading, which is our second issue. Behind the perceived convenience and efficiency of Uber lies an unfortunate truth. Deadheading accounts for about 40% of the miles logged by Uber and Lyft vehicles. This means that 40% of the time, drivers are traveling to pick up passenger or cruising on the streets while waiting for a ride request. Looking at it from a management perspective, this is a inefficient allocation of resources. There are several impacts, but the most prominent by far is pollution. Studies show that Uber and Lyft produce an estimate of 69% more carbon emissions than during driving private vehicles. My partner and I have come up with 3 solutions. First, simply cross-apply our solution to distracted driving. By locking the app and blocking incoming requests while drivers are driving, this forces drivers to park in order to receive driver requests and plan out their routes before departure, reducing the time traveling without a passenger. If we can reduce deadheading, we can also reduce emission, which in turn reduces its effect on our planet. Besides this, there's also carpooling and electric vehicles to be considered. First, on carpooling, when Lyft attempted to promote carpooling in the past, they were met with resistance from the riders. While data is limited, the California Air Resource Board reports that riders asked for pool trips about 20% of the time, and we believe that if the rider and the driver were both properly incentivized, we will be able to increase the percentage. Originally, Lyft gave riders a discount on shared rides based on the city, the likelihood of getting matched, and the current driver supply, while promising the driver a base fare fee, the time and the distance of the entire route, but no other subsidies. We suggest 2 improvements. It is important to show riders concrete evidence how much they would actually be able to save if they do carpool, and second of all, to incentivize drivers as well as riders. If drivers took up a proactive role in promoting shared rides, it would definitely increase carpooling. Drivers would receive their base fee calculated by time and distance just as any other rides, but Uber would take less of a cut from the ride, so they would be allowed to keep more of their fare during a situation when people do carpool. Uber would also incentivize their customers by making it clear that carpooling will mean that the fare will be split between the parties, so that if the ride was originally $12 for one person, 2 people carpooling would split the cost and each would pay $6. Aside from carpooling, electrifying vehicle is just as important. With more than 99% of Uber cars being gas cars, it's no wonder that ride-hailing apps increase pollution by almost 70%. Many living under the assumption that electric cars are more expensive than gas cars, but research disagrees. There are 3 areas to take into consideration. A, structurally, electric cars cost less in maintenance due to repairing, less moving parts to operate, lack of exhaust system, less needed cooling, etc. And B, in terms of gas costs, which is particularly relevant to Uber drivers, electricity is considerably cheaper than gas. A study done at University of Michigan found that driving an electric car reduced the price by half. Finally, one must take into the consideration of government and state subsidies for electric cars. Uber would incentivize all of its drivers once again by reducing the percentage it takes from each ride. The company would also separate those with hybrid cars and those with full electric cars. A driver with a hybrid car would, for example, be eligible to keep 80% of the fare instead of 75%, as Uber currently takes a 25% cut. And a driver with a full electric car would maybe be eligible to keep 85% of the fare instead of 75%. An electric non-pulled ride-hailing trip can cut emission by about 53%, and an electric pulled ride-hailing trip can cut emission about 79% compared to a private vehicle trip in the average car. If we don't want to die in the end, taking care of the earth is kind of important, and statistics clearly show that carpooling and electric car are effective at that. This leads me to my 3rd issue of rebranding. By making and promoting Uber as a green company, we also solve one of the critical issues faced by Uber, that is high turnover rates. Research finds that around 3% of the people who signed up to drive for Uber are driving a year later. Uber's losses today have become sort of a legend, with operating loss in 2016 amounting to more than $3 billion. It increased 35% to $4.1 billion in 2017 and fell back to $3 billion in 2018, but it is still extremely high given Uber's maturity, low driver wages, IPO, and growth. Setting aside Uber's monthly sales and marketing spending for driver acquisition plus partner incentives, we end up with average driver acquisition cost of about $650. That is a lot for a turnover rate of over 97%. Studies actually show that there's a positive correlation between employee morale and productivity and retention rate. So by rebranding Uber as a green company, we make drivers more proud to work for Uber, hence increasing employee morales, therefore increasing retention rate. To conclude, we must upgrade Uber app to block our ride requests while driving. Not only does this reduce distracted driving, it also solves deadheading, which in turn solves pollution and rebrands Uber as a green company, increasing driver retention. Thank you.